This is a video demonstrating how to install the DEMA autofill float valve in the Ranger high or low pressure portable. After downloading and printing the drilling template, we place the black line to the far left on the template on the mold line that is part of the rotational molded housing. By placing it visually against the line, rolling the paper over to the side so you make sure that that black line lines right up with the hard edge of this mold line. Follow the line all the way down to the housing where it intersects. That's perfect alignment. The height of the template at the top is right near the top part of the beginning of the radius of this upper plane right here. The housing has two planes, an upper and a lower, neither of which are perfectly vertical. After you found this sweet spot, which is 1.5 inches exactly, taking a tape measure from the visual edge, I'm going to start at number 2 inches, the visual edge of the line, it places it at 1.5 inches where the crosshair vertical starts. I've already drilled my hole and I can compare that to make sure it's accurate. So after placement, you can tape this template as a disposable paper, or you can laminate it and have a tiny pinhole here for accurate placement so you can use the same template over and over. In time it'll be pretty natural and you'll be accurate without having to be so precise. So after taking a drift punch or scratch awl, punch the dead center at the crosshairs firmly so it's a deep set. Remove the template, take your drill, which I've given instructions as to what type of bit, where to get, and how much. Putting it in a rechargeable drill, variable speed. Place the center point over the set that you just created, drill the hole. You will have shavings that will fall into the tank that you don't want in the tank, so put a large towel or blanket inside so that you can pull that back out, or run a vacuum during the process, which is noisy and inconvenient. You can pull the blanket out and get almost all the shavings out of the tank without having to chase them later. Now you proceed to assemble the bulkhead nut with the other fittings, which is, in my case, I use a female quick disconnect. I've installed it because I've uninstalled and installed this 3 times into that fitting. Making sure your Teflon is not extra and going inside. You're going to wrap your Teflon clockwise, always clockwise, so that when the threads mesh, they wrap on, not off of the other fitting. 2 to 3 is all you need. Do the other end while you're at it. It's easier to handle this way. 1, 2, or 3 wraps. Making sure that waterway is clear. Install your hex nipple into this end of the bulkhead fitting. It will go in both ends, but we want this end to be for the valve. Hand tighten. Then taking your valve assembly and float, which should have a hex stainless steel nipple already installed. Now DEMA has sent you, according to your picture, they've sent you one without that in there. You'll have to use your own hex nipple. So the hex nipple goes in. Be careful not to over tighten. This is a polymer housing. It could over tighten, expand, and crack. Teflon tape on the incoming side, Teflon on the outcoming. and then proceed to install this assembly by hand onto that hex nipple. Taking a 9/16 inch wrench and a larger wrench or crescent, you're going to tighten this assembly snugly. It's metal on metal. You can tighten pretty tight. Do not grab the housing of the float switch, as you will expand and crack that, even though there are two flats allowing you to do so. If you do, you could over tighten and crack that housing. When it's tight, take your valve assembly and bulkhead nut assembly and hex nipple, place your O-ring over that assembly, and then by bringing this whole assembly, before that we want to make sure we've adjusted our beaded chain in the bridle to the very last bead. Do not have any length or distance between the bridle and the float cap, or it will drag bottom and not actuate. It only travels 3/4 of an inch, but that 3/4 of an inch represents this much water transition between low and high, or off and on. So it takes that much water to displace 3/4 of an inch of buoyancy in this float. Now that you've got this to this stage, you place it inside the tank, which I'm not going to record that activity, through the hole, then placing the steel star lock washer over the bulkhead nut, and then the supplied jam nut up against the star lock washer, hand tighten, and then taking a 7/16 inch wrench inside the tank to place over the hex stainless steel hex nut, or in your case the brass hex nut, into the tank, securing that hex nut, and then outside with a crescent wrench or a wrench of your choice, tighten the bulkhead nut. Good and tight. It is plastic, it is cinching an O-ring at the same time. Making sure that inside your float is as horizontal as possible. As the float rotates incorrectly, it will lean against the wall here or out into the tank this way. You want it straight up and down. As you tighten, you'll notice shavings flying off of the fitting. That is the brass digging into the steel washer. That's okay. That's showing it's tight. I'm going to record inside, try to show you what's going on in there and the position of the wrench placement on the hex nut. There's your hex nut, there's your bulkhead flange, and there's your hex nut. This is what you're going to grab. Do not grab the housing of the valve. This polymer will crack. So grab this and hold it so that it's level. I'm going to rotate to show you when it's not level, as the valve is tipping one way or the other. You want it to be straight up and down like that, so that this float actuator travels up and down and doesn't rub the tank. And that's pretty much all there is to it, except you're going to mount the quick disconnect onto this assembly that we've just created. I use a male. The industry typically has females. We can put anything we want. This is not a high pressure point. This is just an auto fill, low pressure from a house, from a hose bib, or in the case of hot water, from the sink adapter ring set. Again, if you're going to place this on and tighten it, you need to hold the back hex nut in place and proceed to tighten it on. Otherwise you will rotate the valve again inside the tank. You do not want to do that. I notice I did not tighten this nipple, so I am going to do that now. It should have been tightened before I put the valve into the tank. It's easier to do it out than it is to do it on the tank. But I'm holding inside the tank with a 7/16 inch wrench that valve assembly at the hex nut, not on the valve body, never on the valve body. And I'm tightening it now so that it cinches in. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten the quick disconnect fitting till it's firm and tight. Again, I'm going to double check and make sure this is cinched in. Plastic can continue to tighten until it's paper thin. You just want to make sure you're getting it good and tight, so in transport you're not banging around and loosening up. And that's pretty much it. The installation of the autofill float valve in the Ranger high pressure and Ranger portables.